Zara pressed her small face against the cool metal of the observation deck window, watching the stars drift by like scattered diamonds on black silk. At only 12 cycles old, she was considered barely more than a hatchling among the Kethvar, yet her mind buzzed with questions that even the eldest of her pack couldn't answer to her satisfaction. The massive colony ship Crimson Hunt had been her home for as long as she could remember. Its corridors echoed with the soft padding of clawed feet and the occasional growl of conversation in the deep, rumbling language of her people. The ship housed nearly 10,000 Kethvar, all searching for a new world to call home after their original planet had been strip-mined to barrenness by the Galactic Trade Federation. Zara's golden fur rippled as she shifted position, her 6 legs tucking beneath her sleek, feline-like body. Her species had evolved from apex predators on a world where everything with more than 2 legs was either hunter or prey. The Kethvar had clearly been hunters. Their razor-sharp teeth, retractable claws, and enhanced senses made them formidable predators even in the civilized galaxy. But Zara had never understood why. "Why do we only eat meat, Mother?" she had asked countless times during feeding periods, watching as her family tore into the synthetic protein blocks that mimicked the flesh of their ancient prey. "Because we are Kethvar," her mother, Nexara, would always reply with the patience of one who had answered this question many times before. "We are hunters. It is our nature." "But why is it our nature?" Zara would persist, her large amber eyes reflecting genuine confusion. "The Zilnathi eat only plants and they're strong. The Korthans eat minerals and they can live for thousands of years. Why must we only eat meat?" Her mother's ears would flatten slightly in frustration. "Some questions do not need answers, little star. Accept what you are." But Zara could not accept it. The question gnawed at her like hunger itself, growing stronger each day as she watched the other species aboard the ship during trading stops. She had seen Zelkaran children playing with crystalline toys that they would occasionally nibble on like snacks. She had observed Trillian families gathering around bowls of luminescent algae, their skin glowing brighter as they absorbed the nutrients through photosynthesis. None of them seemed to struggle with questions about their nature. They simply were what they were. The colony ship had been traveling through space for 3 generations now, stopping at various stations and planets to trade, refuel, and search for a suitable world to colonize. During these stops, Zara had encountered dozens of different species, each with their own dietary needs and cultural practices. Yet she was the only one who seemed troubled by the fundamental question of why. Today was different, though. Today, the ship had docked at Nexus Station, one of the largest trading posts in this sector of the galaxy. Unlike the smaller outposts they usually visited, Nexus Station was home to hundreds of different species, including some that Zara had only heard about in stories. Including humans. Zara had heard whispers about humans from the adult Kethvar. They spoke of the pale, bipedal creatures with a mixture of respect and wariness that she found intriguing. Humans were apparently one of the newest species to join the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Yet they had already made quite an impression. "Dangerous," she had heard her Uncle Grim mutter during a family gathering. "They think differently than the rest of us. Unpredictable." "Adaptable," her Aunt Kyra had countered. "I heard they can eat almost anything, plants, meat, even synthetic compounds. How do they manage that?" That conversation had stuck with Zara for weeks. A species that could eat anything. How was that possible? Her own people would become violently ill if they tried to consume plant matter, and synthetic alternatives barely provided adequate nutrition. The idea of dietary flexibility seemed almost magical to her. Now, as she watched the docking procedures through the observation window, she wondered if she might finally get a chance to meet one of these mysterious humans. Perhaps they could help her understand something that her own people seemed incapable of explaining. The docking clamps engaged with a resonating clang that echoed through the ship's hull. Zara felt the slight vibration through her paws as the artificial gravity adjusted to match the station's rotation. Soon, the airlocks would open, and trading would begin. "Zara," her mother's voice called from somewhere deeper in their family quarters. "Come away from there. We have preparations to make." Reluctantly, Zara pulled herself away from the window. Her family was part of the trading delegation, which meant she would actually get to visit the station during their 3-day stopover. The thought sent a thrill of excitement through her small body, her tail twitching with anticipation. As she padded through the corridors toward her family's quarters, Zara passed other Kethvar making their own preparations. The adults moved with the fluid grace of natural predators, their conversations focused on trade goods, navigation charts, and the eternal search for their new home world. None of them seemed burdened by existential questions about their nature. Why was she so different? Why couldn't she simply accept what she was, as her mother had advised? In their quarters, Zara's family was organizing their trade goods. Her father, Kron, was a skilled metalworker, and their quarters were filled with intricate sculptures and practical tools crafted from various exotic alloys. Her mother specialized in navigation charts, mapping star systems and hyperspace routes with an accuracy that was highly valued by other spacefaring species. "Zara, help your sister pack the small sculptures," her mother instructed, gesturing toward a collection of delicate figurines that her father had created during their long journey. Zara's older sister, Vex, was already carefully wrapping the metal sculptures in protective foam. At 18 cycles old, Vex was approaching adulthood and had already begun showing the focused intensity that characterized mature Kethvar. She barely glanced up as Zara joined her at the work table. "Try not to damage anything," Vex said without much interest. "Father spent months on these pieces." Zara nodded and began helping with the packing, but her mind was elsewhere. Through their quarters' small porthole, she could see the vast expanse of Nexus Station spreading out before them. The station was a massive construction, part space dock and part city, with countless ships of every size and configuration attached to its many docking arms. Somewhere out there were the humans she had heard so much about. "Mother," she said carefully, "will I be allowed to explore the station while you conduct business?" Nexara paused in her inventory counting. "You may accompany us to the trading floors, but you are not to wander off alone. Nexus Station is enormous, and many of the species here are unknown to us. It would be easy to become lost." "Of course, Mother." Zara tried to keep the disappointment out of her voice. She had hoped for more freedom to satisfy her curiosity. Her father looked up from his own packing. "The trading floors will have plenty to see, little star. Representatives from dozens of species will be there, along with goods from across the galaxy. You might even see some of the legendary human traders." "Humans?" Zara's ears perked up with interest. "They trade here." "Occasionally," Kron nodded. "They're relatively new to interstellar commerce, but they've quickly developed a reputation for fair dealing and creative problem-solving. Some say they're too trusting, others claim they're cunningly deceptive. I suspect the truth is more complex." Zara's tail twitched with excitement. This might be her chance to finally get some answers to her questions. If humans could eat anything, surely they would understand why different species had different dietary needs. Maybe they could explain what her own people couldn't. As her family finished their preparations, Zara found herself staring out the porthole again. The station's lights twinkled like stars, each one representing possibilities she had never imagined. For the first time in her young life, she felt like she was on the verge of discovering something important. She didn't yet know that her simple question about diet would lead to revelations that would change not just her understanding of herself, but her entire species' place in the galaxy. All she knew was that tomorrow, when they visited the trading floors, she would finally have a chance to ask someone who might actually have answers. The stars continued their eternal dance outside the porthole, indifferent to the hopes and dreams of one small Kethvar cub. But Zara felt certain that tomorrow would bring the beginning of something extraordinary. The trading floors of Nexus Station were unlike anything Zara had ever imagined. The massive central hall stretched upward for what seemed like kilometers, its curved ceiling displaying a real-time view of the star field outside. Hundreds of vendor stalls, floating platforms, and mobile trading posts filled the space, creating a three-dimensional marketplace that buzzed with activity from dozens of different species. Zara stayed close to her parents as they navigated through the crowds, her eyes wide with wonder. She saw Trillians whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, massive Gornic traders whose rock-like hides clinked softly as they moved, and graceful Yelendi whose gossamer wings created tiny whirlwinds as they fluttered between stalls. But no humans yet. "This way," her father rumbled, his deep voice cutting through the ambient noise of the marketplace. "The metalwork section is on level 7. As they rode the gravity lift upward, Zara watched the trading floor spread out below them like a living mosaic. The sheer diversity of species and their various technologies created a constantly shifting pattern of colors, shapes, and movements. It was beautiful and overwhelming at the same time. "Stay close," her mother warned as they reached their designated level. "And remember, you're representing our family and our ship. Behave accordingly." The metalwork section was filled with artisans and traders from across the galaxy, each displaying their unique styles and techniques. Zara's father quickly found an interested customer for his sculptures, a tall, crystalline being who communicated through harmonic vibrations that made the air itself sing. While her parents conducted business, Zara found herself drawn to a nearby stall that displayed what appeared to be living metal sculptures. The vendor was unlike any species she had encountered before, with smooth, pale skin and strange, forward-facing eyes. It took her a moment to realize what she was looking at. A human. The human was shorter than her parents, but moved with a confident efficiency that reminded her of the way experienced hunters carried themselves. Their hair was a dark brown color, and they wore simple, practical clothing that seemed designed for comfort rather than display. Most intriguingly, they appeared to be eating something while they worked. Zara crept closer, trying to get a better look. The human was consuming what appeared to be a combination of different foods, some kind of grain-based item, pieces of synthesized protein, and even what looked like processed plant matter, all at the same time. Her Aunt Kyra had been right. Humans really could eat anything. "Excuse me," she said softly, using the standard galactic trade language that all spacefaring species learned. "Are you human?" The human looked up from their meal, and Zara was struck by how expressive their eyes were. Unlike the predator species she was familiar with, these eyes seemed designed more for communication than hunting. "I am," the human replied with a gentle smile. "My name is David Chen. Are you from the Kethvar colony ship that just docked?" Zara nodded, suddenly feeling shy. "I'm Zara. I've never met a human before." "Well, it's very nice to meet you, Zara." David's voice was warm and friendly, without any of the territorial undertones that characterized interactions between most predator species. "Is there something I can help you with?" Zara glanced back toward her parents, who were still deep in negotiations with their potential customer. She had a few minutes before they would notice her absence. "I have a question," she said, moving closer to David's stall. "About eating." David raised what Zara realized were eyebrows, mobile patches of hair above his eyes that seemed to be used for expression. "About eating? That's an interesting question from a young Kethvar. What would you like to know?" "Why do different species eat different things?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "I mean, my people only eat meat, and if we try to eat anything else, we get sick. But I've seen other species eat rocks or plants or light, and you—" She gestured at his mixed meal. "You seem to eat everything." David set down his food and gave her his full attention. "That's actually a really good question. Have you asked your parents about it?" Zara's ears drooped slightly. "They always say it's just our nature, but I want to know why it's our nature. Why can't we eat other things like you can?" David was quiet for a moment, studying her with those strange, forward-facing eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful and serious, as if he was speaking to an adult rather than a cub. "The simple answer is evolution," he said. "Every species develops based on their environment and the challenges they faced while evolving. Your people evolved as predators on a world where hunting was necessary for survival. Your entire digestive system, your teeth, your instincts, they're all perfectly designed for that lifestyle." "But why couldn't we evolve to eat other things too?" Zara asked. "Like you did." David smiled. "Well, that's where it gets interesting. Humans are what we call omnivores. We evolved from creatures that had to be very adaptable to survive. Our homeworld Earth went through many climate changes and environmental challenges. Sometimes there was plenty of meat available, sometimes only plants, sometimes we had to make do with whatever we could find. So we developed the ability to digest many different types of food." This was more explanation than Zara had ever received about dietary evolution. She found herself leaning forward, fascinated. "But that's not the whole story," David continued. "You see, every species' diet tells you something about their history and their strengths. The Kethvar didn't need to become omnivores because you were so successful as predators. Your ancestors were probably the apex predators on your world. Nothing could challenge you, so you never needed to adapt to eat other things. So we're stronger because we only eat meat. Zara asked, trying to understand. In some ways, yes. Your people are incredibly efficient hunters. Your senses, your reflexes, your ability to work together as a pack, these are all advantages that come from your predator heritage. Humans had to become generalists to survive, but that meant we're not as specialized as other species. Zara thought about this. But you seem to be doing well in the galaxy. My father says humans are successful traders. David laughed, and the sound was pleasant and musical. We are, but not because we're the strongest or the fastest or the best hunters. We're successful because our adaptability taught us to think differently about problems. When we couldn't overpower our challenges, we had to outthink them. Is that why humans are considered dangerous? Zara asked, remembering her uncle's words. David's expression grew more serious. Some species find us unpredictable because our evolution taught us to find new solutions to old problems. We don't always respond the way other species expect us to. But dangerous, I think that depends on how you define the word. Before Zara could ask what he meant by that, she heard her mother calling her name from across the trading area. She looked back to see her parents finishing their business with the crystalline trader. I have to go, she said reluctantly. But thank you for explaining. No one has ever told me about evolution before. Wait, David said, reaching into a container beside his stall. He pulled out what appeared to be a small, rectangular package. Here, take this. Zara examined the package carefully. It seemed to be some kind of food wrapped in a thin, edible membrane. What is it? It's called a nutrition bar. It's designed to provide balanced nutrition for humans, but it's made from ingredients that most species can safely consume in small amounts. The wrapper is made from processed algae. The filling contains synthetic proteins and carbohydrates derived from various plant sources. Zara stared at the bar in amazement. You mean this one food could feed different species? In theory, yes. Humans developed these for long space voyages, when we needed to carry food that could sustain us for months or years. But we designed them to be as universally compatible as possible, in case we encountered other species who needed emergency nutrition. Why would you do that? Zara asked. Why would you create food for species you had never met? David's smile returned. Because that's how humans think. We always assume we'll encounter new friends who might need help. It's part of our nature. Zara, her mother's voice was closer now, with a note of urgency that suggested she was running out of patience. Coming, mother, Zara called back. She carefully tucked the nutrition bar into her carrying pouch. Thank you, David Chen. This has been the most interesting conversation I've ever had. The pleasure was mine, Zara. Take care of yourself. As Zara hurried back to her parents, her mind was spinning with new ideas. Evolution, adaptation. The idea that dietary needs were connected to history and environment rather than just random nature. And most intriguingly, the concept that humans had developed solutions for problems they hadn't even encountered yet. Where were you? Her mother asked with mild disapproval. Talking to a human trader, Zara replied honestly. He explained about evolution and why different species eat different things. Her father's ears perked up with interest. Really? What did he say? As they made their way through the trading floors, Zara recounted her conversation with David Chen. She watched her parents' expressions carefully, nodding their surprise at some of the concepts she described. Interesting, her father mused when she finished. I had not thought of diet as being connected to environmental challenges. It makes sense, though. The human gave you food? Her mother asked, eyeing the nutrition bar with suspicion. He said it was designed to be safe for most species, Zara explained, as an emergency food source. Her parents exchanged a look that she couldn't quite interpret. There was something in their expression that suggested this information was more significant than they were letting on. We should return to the ship, her mother said finally. Your father has completed his business for today. As they made their way back toward the docking area, Zara found herself looking at everything with new eyes. Every species they passed represented a different evolutionary path, a different solution to the challenge of survival. The Kethvar way was just one possibility among many. But David had suggested that each way had its own strengths. What strengths did the Kethvar possess that they themselves didn't fully understand? And why did her parents seem so thoughtful about the human's gift of food, designed for emergencies they had never encountered? Those questions would have to wait, But Zara felt certain that her conversation with David Chen was just the beginning of a much larger discovery about her people and their place in the galaxy. 3 days later, as the Crimson Hunt prepared to depart Nexus Station, Zara sat in her family's quarters examining the nutrition bar David had given her. She had been turning it over in her paws for hours, studying its simple design and wondering if she dared to try it. The conversations she'd had with David had opened up entirely new ways of thinking about her species and their place in the galaxy. But they had also raised questions that her parents seemed reluctant to discuss in detail. The humans spoke of adaptation and problem-solving, her father had said during their evening meal the previous day. But I wonder if he understood the true implications of what he was describing. "What do you mean?" Zara had asked. Her mother and father had exchanged another of those meaningful looks. "Some adaptations are more significant than others, little star. The Kethvar have abilities that we perhaps don't fully appreciate ourselves." But they had refused to elaborate, leaving Zara more curious than ever. Now, as she held the nutrition bar, she made a decision. She carefully removed the algae wrapper and took a small bite of the synthetic protein and carbohydrate mixture inside. The taste was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't the rich, satisfying flavor of meat that her body craved. Instead, it was mild and slightly sweet, with a texture that was both familiar and foreign. More importantly, her digestive system didn't immediately reject it. She took another small bite, then another. To her amazement, she felt no discomfort at all. If anything, she experienced a subtle energy that was different from what she got from her normal diet. It was as if different parts of her body were responding to the nutrition in ways they had never had a chance to before. "Zara," her mother's voice came from the corridor outside her sleeping alcove. "The captain wants to speak with our family. Please join us in the common area." Quickly, Zara wrapped up the remaining nutrition bar and tucked it away. She had eaten perhaps a quarter of it, and she wanted to save the rest for further experimentation. In the common area, she found her parents sitting with Captain Voss, the massive, scarred Kethvar who commanded their colony ship. The captain was old by their standards, her golden fur silvered with age, and her presence always commanded respect. "Ah, young Zara," Captain Voss rumbled as she entered the room. "Your parents tell me you had an interesting conversation with a human trader." Zara nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. "Yes, Captain, he explained about evolution and adaptation." "And he gave you a gift of food designed for multiple species," the captain continued. "May I see it?" Reluctantly, Zara retrieved the nutrition bar from her alcove. She noticed that Captain Voss examined it very carefully, and her expression grew thoughtful. "Have you tried it?" the captain asked. Zara glanced at her parents, unsure how to answer. Her mother's ears were flattened with concern, while her father looked curious rather than disapproving. "A little," she admitted. "It didn't make me sick like other non-meat foods do." Captain Voss nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. Zara, what I'm about to tell you must not be shared with anyone outside this room. Do you understand?" "Yes, Captain." The human was correct about evolution and adaptation, but there are aspects of Kethvar evolution that we have kept hidden for generations. Your question about diet has touched on something that our people have been concealing since we first encountered other galactic species. Zara felt her heart racing. What kind of secret? Captain Voss settled her bulk more comfortably and began what sounded like a well-rehearsed explanation. "The truth is that the Kethvar are not purely carnivorous. We evolved that way, yes, but we also evolved the ability to adapt our digestive systems when necessary. In times of extreme scarcity, our ancestors could temporarily modify their metabolism to process other types of nutrition." "But we're never taught about that," Zara said, confused. "Everyone says we can only eat meat." "Because we chose to maintain that limitation," her father said quietly. "When we first encountered the galactic community, we discovered that our adaptability was seen as a threat by other species." Captain Voss nodded grimly. Species that could only eat one type of food were predictable. They could be controlled through resource management and trade dependencies. But a species that could adapt to eat anything would be too independent, too unpredictable. Other civilizations had already established their positions in the galactic hierarchy based on their limitations. Our flexibility threatened that balance. Zara struggled to understand the implications. so we pretend to be limited to meat only. We made a collective decision generations ago, the captain explained. We would maintain our traditional diet and present ourselves as specialized predators. This gave us a specific niche in galactic society. We became known as excellent hunters and warriors, feared but not threatening to the established order. But Zara searched for the right word, that's lying about what we really are. It's survival, her mother said firmly. The galaxy is not always kind to species that are too different or too capable. Look at what happened to our homeworld, stripped bare by the Trade Federation because we were seen as a resource to be exploited rather than equals to be respected. Captain Voss leaned forward. The human you spoke with seems to understand adaptation in a way that most species do not. Humans have faced similar challenges. They're newcomers to the galaxy, and their adaptability has already made some species nervous. But they've chosen a different approach than we did. What approach? Zara asked. They're open about their capabilities, but they present them as tools for cooperation rather than dominance. The nutrition bar he gave you is a perfect example. Humans could have kept their emergency food technology to themselves, but instead they designed it to help any species that might need it. Zara thought about her conversation with David, remembering his explanation of how humans always assumed they would meet new friends who might need help. He said it was just their nature. Precisely, Captain Voss said. And that suggests that humans might be the first species we've encountered who could understand and accept our true capabilities without seeing them as a threat. What does that mean for us? Zara asked. Her parents and the captain exchanged those meaningful looks again. It means, Captain Voss said slowly, that perhaps it's time for some of our people to consider a different approach. We've spent generations hiding our true nature, but isolation has its own costs. We're still searching for a new homeworld, still dependent on trade with species who see us only as specialized predators. But change is dangerous, her mother added. If we reveal our adaptability to the wrong species at the wrong time, it could lead to our extinction rather than our acceptance. Captain Voss stood up, her massive form casting shadows across the room. Which is why your curiosity is so important, young Zara. You asked the questions that we had forbidden ourselves to ask, and you found a human who answered those questions with wisdom rather than fear. What happens now? Zara asked. Now we continue our journey, but with new possibilities to consider. The human, David Chen, provided you with more than just food and explanations. He demonstrated that there are species in the galaxy who think differently about cooperation and mutual aid. That knowledge is valuable beyond measure. As Captain Voss prepared to leave, she turned back to Zara. Continue to ask your questions, little star. Continue to think about what we could be rather than just what we have been. But be careful who you ask and how you ask. Not all species are as open-minded as your human friend. After the captain left, Zara sat with her parents in contemplative silence. Finally, her father spoke. Are you sorry you asked your questions? He rumbled softly. Zara considered this. In the span of a few days, her understanding of her people and their place in the galaxy had been completely transformed. She had learned that the Kethvar were both more and less than she had believed, more capable than they pretended to be, but also more constrained by circumstances beyond their control. No, she said finally. I'm not sorry. I think understanding the truth is always better than accepting comfortable lies. Her mother's ears relaxed slightly. That's a very human way of thinking, she observed. Maybe, Zara agreed, but maybe that's not a bad thing. That night, as the Crimson Hunt departed Nexus Station and returned to its eternal search for a new home, Zara stood at the observation deck window again. But this time, instead of feeling frustrated by questions without answers, she felt hopeful about possibilities she had never imagined. Somewhere out there were humans who designed food for friends they had never met. Somewhere out there was David Chen, who had taken time to answer a young Kethvar's questions with respect and honesty. And somewhere out there was a future where her people might not have to hide what they truly were. The stars no longer looked like distant, unreachable diamonds. They looked like destinations waiting to be explored by a species that was finally ready to discover its true potential. As she finished the last of the nutrition bar, Zara made a silent promise to herself. When she grew up, she would find ways to build bridges between species rather than walls. She would ask questions that needed to be asked and seek answers that needed to be found. She would be the kind of Kethvar who could talk to humans as equals, and perhaps help her people find not just a new world, but a new place in the galaxy where they could finally be themselves. The stars waited patiently for that future to unfold.